Oh, hello, hello, all my adoring fans. This is Smiles Rant, number 500,000. We're doing a little bit of age 111 changes. Now, I don't want this to be a super long video because there is very little changed from revised. But then again, a lot of people don't give a shit about anything before finals, so I suppose I have to give it all a once over. So let's figure it out. Starting, I'll let you know that Sage is back, and there's a fair bit of science options in there, so knowing when the age is actually going to end matters a lot for science builds, because if you're plus or minus a week, that can easily make or break your build. Whew. Too long, didn't read changes. You're going to need to be 25 for full bonuses on war wins. There will be kingdom and not individual. They shouldn't change the preamble here, I guess. Growth rewards. I guess you individually get the bonuses, but the kingdom land is what gives you the bonus, so maybe fair enough. Aggressive is buffed, and hostility meter is weird. Preamble. Play is 25. Preamble. The actual stats here, you're losing about 20% of your war win bonuses, and that is not including credits. That is just your science and honor and land. So you're losing about 20% for a person you don't have, but you're still getting a little bit. But you're losing far more than that when it comes to the actual war points. So as far as war crown is concerned, you're really going to want to be 25. Even if you're 24, you're going to need like 50% more wars. So maybe you can grab one war at a lower size and then add a province and be okay, but that's about it. As for, land, science, honor rewards, I don't think this is gonna completely make you lose. I think you can still run a 23-man kingdom and win a lot of wars and end up at a great size and with a lot of honor. And I think a lot more of the honor is going to be on your TMs, because at current, when you win a war, if you win several wars, your honor tends to inflate and you end up with all these Baron and Viscount core. But when you don't have this bonus, most of the honor gains in wars are going right to your TMs. So you're going to end up with a lot of high honor TMs, but still a lower kingdom honor rank. And I think that can lead you to getting more wars and eventually sort of scaling and, potentially looking at other crowns. Bunch of math here you can read. So, land-based growth rewards. Once you reach this size as a kingdom, you permanently get that bonus for the rest of the game. Your first two, and then it's at every 15,000 acres, starting at 35,000 acres. So early on, you get some science bonuses, and I think the point of putting these bonuses in early is to just push people to try and get that size early, because the earlier you get that generation up, the more it's going to scale, and everyone in Utopia is a science whore anyways. So I hope to see a lot of people push for that. 10% honor bonus, not huge. I don't think that's a huge bonus. I don't think people are going to care that much about getting it. But then 5% building efficiency is pretty strong. 15% military wages is very strong. Then 5% science efficiency at that 110,000 mark, very strong. And finally, some bonus offense at 130,000. So I expect most people are going to hit that 50k range and then hover 50 to 80k most of the age. I don't think we're going to see higher end kingdoms as much just popping out as you might hope or expect, but we'll see. Could be we see a lot more growth. Explore pool's gone. Now you're getting 2 acres daily. I believe it used to be 3 acres daily. So total pool is down, but without having to store it, everyone has the same, end of war, end of age land that they can use, with a slight difference based on what they've used so far and on, how many wars you had, I suppose. Defects are going to intentionally fill high province kingdoms up. I like that a lot. But, the kind of people defecting are also not the kind of people you necessarily want. So, gonna have to take it. Aggression changes. You've got bonus gains, bonus attack time. This attack time is almost enough to keep you at 12-hour waves without any racks or anything. That's nice. The big one here for most people is going to be that hostility generation. So giving half the meter per hit is going to be pretty big. This is also going to, entice people to do a little bit more out of war rather than, having to wave or not wave. You can fit a lot of hits onto people with aggressive before actually giving a button. So you can whittle away at their TMs if you want. Then again, if you do that, people probably just won't war you. So it's a little bit damned if you do, damned if you don't there. Relation changes. There is no hostility decay naturally happening on the server anymore. What you do have is you can ceasefire people, just like old times. When you enter war, all of your meters reset. So once you enter a war, you can't have old buttons and then press them after. So you're never going to go from a war to a second war right away. However, what you will have is everyone else still has their button on you if they haven't gone to war. It's a little bit hard to be sure what it's saying here, but that's what it's saying. There's never a situation where you go to war, you leave war, and you have a button waiting for you. You do, however, have the option of going to war, leaving war, and someone declares you right away. So you're going to have to be paying attention, but you'll never be more prepared than after leaving end of war ceasefire. So you should be fine. Also, there's no aggressive force ceasefire. So, yeah, if no one wants to ceasefire you, you're going to have to figure it out. Libraries are buffed 50%. I think that's smart if you want libraries to be used, because before I don't know of anyone using any libraries last age. I think 1.5% is pretty good. And then when you also think about the science changes we'll see later, you'll see libraries quite a bit in the late age, I think. Castles no longer protect from learns. So if you're a super high science guy, or you're a sage or whatever, you're not going to be able to sort of stack a bunch of minus science losses. Learns are increased by 25%. Raises are buffed. And you can no longer send one soldier to get hostile meter. Now, essentially, if you bounce raise at 99%, it's going to, give you regular meter. At 50%, I guess, it gives you 3 points. But at 99%, it also gives you 3 points. I would have assumed 6 points, but I guess it's capped at 3. So that seems fine. Raise bouncing has other penalties from past ages, so it's not particularly attractive right now. Let's get into race and personality. Avians. They have essentially the same attack time, but now you're reliant on quick feet. So that's just a little bit nerfed to, your mana and requiring guilds. It's going to be a little bit worse in the trenches specifically when you don't necessarily have access to guilds. Minus 70% damage from nightmares. I don't think that's particularly significant, but it's just something there, I guess. I'm not really sure what the thought was. I guess it's just flavor is my best bet. Immunity to ambush, not particularly significant in war, but it's pretty significant for a lot of growth kingdoms and out of war waves, so I could see some happy things going on for Avian. Their unique ability is the same as it was. You can't use it out of war. But yeah, it's a super strong ability. It's most effective against TMs, I would say. People that you aren't necessarily going to be able to break. I was facing some Avians last age, and they made pretty decent use of this. My idea to use this initially was just mass enemy rogues with your spare offense, and then by the end of war, they won't have rogues anymore. The age I did go Avians, and we did Crown Honor. We didn't really do that, and I don't know if that was just like maybe it's just bad discipline on my part. Maybe it's just not as effective as I thought it would be. Somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. They've got those increased casualties, and they can no longer use barracks. So, at least one good kingdom out there was pretty regularly using barracks on their Avians, as well as haste, and just crushing people whenever they got a button, because they're just hitting so fast. They're lapping people, beat you home, do a lot of massacres. Not going to be quite as easy to do anymore, but you're still the fastest around. Overall, Avians did lose their birth rate, and they can't use barracks. For most people, not being able to use barracks is no problem. They also lost clear sight. So, you lose about 2% speed. That quick feat's annoying. You gain Town Watch, which, while less necessary without the birth rate, is still an incredible tool for any core. It really just helps you a lot in a lot of chains. So overall, I consider this Avian a buff. They also get +1 on their elite, and it's a little bit cheaper. They lost an O-spec offense. All in all, I consider this a buff to Avian. Other people disagree. The truth is it's probably about the same. I much prefer just a little bit of extra offense compared to almost anything when it comes to Avian. That's just been my experience, is that Avians sort of hit a certain point in offense where they become very strong, and I think that's about what we're approaching. I think your best Avian's next age. Cleric's nice. You can sort of focus on minus losses and being tanky. Warrior, just really push your offense and having offense and speed. You can compare Avian Warrior and Orc Tack or Dryad Tack and make your own decisions there. You're not going to have quite the offense, but you are just a little bit faster. And then I actually quite like Avian Sage. Avians love getting buttons, and Sages love just sitting with all their elites home on universities. So I think they can make that work. Do I want to use Avian on any hybrids? I think Avian's a really good hybrid in general, but it's not something I'm looking at yet. Maybe I will later. Avian, not bad. Dark Elf? Dark Elf. So they lost their free cast, but they sort of gained free cast in their unique ability. This is really good tick 1 of war. It's good if you're a Nightmare province and you have a couple Nightmare provinces and you can sort of cycle through. But it is quite a nerf. You do need runes. You did lose essentially plus 20% instant casting from racial ability. And it's also offensive spells only, so you can't be dicing for free. That was pretty big for Dark Elf. Otherwise, they gained 5% WPA. They've got essentially all the same spells and everything. They lost Magic Ward, but that's no big deal. But they did gain 10% build efficiency. And their elites are quite a bit cheaper. I think I missed that before. And they lost a net worth. I don't know if the net worth's intentional or just remathed. So those are pretty big bonuses. I thought the building efficiency last stage was quite a pain in the butt. And now having lost that, it's a fair buff. Not having the free casting is a big deal, but still having 50% rune cast, it's not going to be a big problem. You can still maybe just have other people feed you runes. You can rob a little bit of runes and it works out. So overall, I think this Dark Elf is a little stronger than last stage. Not a lot stronger, but a little stronger. Dryad, the mystical Dryad. Very interesting race. They've got that 17-3 elite. It's also quite cheap at 900. So this is the most offense on an elite in the game, and the highest offense core in the game. It's not that much higher offense than Orc, so keep that in mind. Orcs are still looking pretty good with Bloodlust. But what you have instead of Orc, you have Clear Sight, very good defensive spell. Ghost Workers, a nice little bit of economy, especially in war. And these two bonuses are interesting. Combined, you're going to have incredibly strong End of War Ceasefires. I think you're barely going to need banks. And I think this draft rate it's quite valuable out of war, in End of War Ceasefire. So Dryad's got a couple of really nice bonuses going for it. They don't really have any penalty other than the attack time. I don't think minus 10% kills is particularly influential. But they really do need that elite. As soon as you're stuck into your O-specs, you're sort of having a problem. So this isn't a race that's going to be happy to do learn waves. You're going to pump and you're going to wait for war. And if you can somehow force them to wave and lose their elites, or you can kill a lot of their elites at home somehow, it's going to hurt them. And for that reason, I like Dryad Sage as well, because you can just sit on universities and know that you're scaling better than people and sort of force them to come to you, or otherwise arrange wars. Their unique ability is that their stables are always at max capacity, and they're immune to Steel War Horses. What this means is the tick, the instant your stables come in, they're at max pop. That's sort of it. My understanding is when you lose your stables, they will leave through normal means and normal rules. If they're out in your army, they stay out in your army. And, you lose 2/3 of the excess a tick or whatever if you've got them home. So it's very interesting. It adds another End of War Ceasefire buff because you can add those stables right at the end or only when you need them. Essentially, just stables for these Dryads now just act like a second training grounds. Like, there's no sort of separate way to think about it. Also, they add 0 net worth, which is weird. I'm not actually 100% sure why, but whatever. That's not nothing. It stops them from going 100% stables last tick of age and getting a bunch of extra net worth, but otherwise, not a huge deal. They still have a pretty high elite net worth. So I think Dryad's looking pretty strong. A lot of this economy here, I think, is easy to underestimate. So even if you just look at the numbers and the speed alone and say, well, that's not amazing, then yeah, you have a lot of other benefits here. I think the hardest thing is you really just need those elites. So if you're growing without warring, it's a problem. Things like that. Dwarf. Dwarf's identical. ish. They lost one half, or they lost one defense on their elite. That's inconsequential. They lost 10% build time. That's inconsequential. Their unique's the same. They did, however, gain Hero's Inspiration, so that's just a little bit of an economic buff. You know, you save yourself a couple ticks of training. You save yourself 5 or 10% on wages. It's nice. That's all. It's nice. You know, so ever so slightly stronger or the same as last age. So it's following a similar path to Dark Elf and Avian. I think almost every sort of top kingdom fits some dwarf in their kingdoms one way or another, primarily for this ability use, but also I think just for sort of rune and eco-stabilization, paying for dragons, stuff like that. The build efficiency, the Miner's Mystique, it goes a really long way for just feeding some gold in the kingdom. And Elf. Big changes to Elf. Well, it did sort of lose 1 mana per tick. You gained greater protection, so you gained about 5% defense. Not quite what you would want. Usually that 11-point or 12-point D-spec's what you want. They get that rune production. They've got great spells. And what they have now is 25% spell damage when you're below 30% mana. So, you know, in most war situations, you're keeping your mana pretty low. And so they have plus 25% spell damage. So they're going to be really good amnesia casters and fireballers, nightmares, you know, tornadoes, God forbid. So they're not just your meteor showers guys. They're able to be that sort of instant caster as well. Much in the way we usually think of as, I think, Dark Elf being more like that. Overall, I think Elf's very strong. That 40% WPA is just really bonkers. You really can't make that up with any other race or build. It's so far beyond what Mage's Fury gives you. And the defensive benefits of that is huge. And they've got this 13 offense elite. It's really something. Like at this point, I think Elf is on the table for literally every role. I think they can be thieves, mages, attackers, hybrids, whatever you want. I think Elf Warrior puts out some pretty modest numbers. Like you're you know, relatively early in the age, you can be flirting with 300 OPA, 100 DPA, and then you've just got this insane magic buff. So yeah, the only downside is this Thieves' Den thing. So they're not ever going to be a pure rogue that does assassinate wizards and prop on you, but I think an elf rogue still does pretty well, just sort of as a night strike bot. You can go a lot of ages with only night striking with your rogues and still do just fine. Maybe you're a little vulnerable to enemy halfling rogues if you do that, though. So, you know, a little bit of a problem for those elf rogues that tend to soak up so much honor when they're good. But yeah, this is what we got. I quite like it. I think Elf can fill, absolutely any role. Maybe you're just a little bit struggling on defense, but you have a fair bit more defense than Dark Elf had last age, and there's a lot of Dark Elf TMs and hybrids that did okay. Fairy is essentially the same as it's been for 3 ages. No big changes. The Elite is slightly more expensive, but no big deal. But they got access to Revelations and Invisibility. So that's 2 pretty significant buffs to Fairy. With this, you know, irreplaceable unique ability, the Mystic Vortex that removes all spells. Fairy has just been a staple for so many people. I don't think that's changing. Fairies are getting quite a big buff here. So, I think Fairy got a better buff than Dark Elf. I think Fairy got a better buff with this than any of the races we've seen so far, except maybe Elf. I think Elf, in terms of the size of the buff, got more than last age, but, I don't know if Fairy's stronger than Elf. I'd say they're looking pretty even. Slightly different roles, but very similar at the same time. So unless we see other sort of bigger offensive picks, I think we're feeling sort of like a TM age in a way. Halfling, essentially unchanged, except for they gained a D-spec offense. So all those halflings are going to be 10% more defense. They lost the wages, but then now they have a bonus to building cost, so it's going to be a little bit tougher for you to swap your halfers. A bit of a pain in the ass, but nothing crazy. 15% population is just like the biggest single bonus anyone gets in the game. They're going to have by far the most defense of any TM. They're going to have by far the best TPA of any TM. They can also run pretty effective hybrids with quick feet. And, it's not the best elite in the world, but the pop space makes up for it. And this ability got nerfed. It's no longer 0 losses on the elite. Or not on the elite, on the unique. It is significant, but at the same time, it's negligible. It's hard to say. You will lose a lot more thieves than you realize if you think you can just proc this ability and max end and fail a few without it being a big deal. You lose a lot at, even 25% losses. So I do like the change. But if you're just smart with your ops, it'll be fine. You're not going to lose because of that. So yeah, I think Halfling's the biggest winner I've seen. I think it's going to be the strongest TM. Can it fill in on the magic rolls? I don't know. I think the like raw power you see from Elf, and even with both Dark Elf and Fairy having Mage's Fury, I think Halfling's still sort of in that magic bitch slot, but yeah, super strong Halflings. Humans. I think humans are buffed just because no one seemed to play human last age. Can't really compare it to last age's human. It's sort of just a completely different build. You got plus 20% income. Very nice, very good. You'll never starve for wages. You'll always have dragon money, stuff like that. Bonus building efficiency when it comes to training grounds, castles, barracks, and hospitals. It's a nice buff, but I would put it at about the same tier as Ghost Workers, this buff. It's going to be about 6 or 7% bonus BE or land. 15% is not a huge number. Your whole building, like all your buildings, isn't just these 4, so that's sort of where you get stuck. Access to Fountain of Knowledge and Rev, so they still have that science focus for sure. But the 25% science efficiency they used to have is much larger than that. Strategic reserves. So when you're in war, every trad you do gives you 3 extra ticks of science. So, in a min-time war, if you're capping out, it's sort of like you're getting double your books in the war. So that's pretty decent, but it's also not amazing. If you're having, let's say you have 6 wars, that's 240 ticks of extra science, but that's spread out for the age. So, it's... Is it a week of extra science? Sort of. And I said at the start of the cast that, 1 week of science makes or breaks the age for science people. So, maybe it is good, but that's your whole unique bonus. Like, you're not getting anything special out of this. It doesn't help you win the wars that you're in before the end of age, so that's a bit of a problem you get. And it's not like every one of your humans is going to get to max this out. If you're bloated and you're big, you're not hitting people that much. Like, I don't know. It's going to be a tough one. 25% WPA, quite a large bonus, but not end of the world. When you're a science-based person, you can compensate for that a little bit. It's still a pretty major penalty. You're going to get landlusted a lot. You're going to struggle with some casting. Farms produce less food. This is like a 3% probably land nerf overall. Maybe you can get someone to help feed you. Maybe you can rob some extra food. But it kind of hurts. And they've got that classic 12-12 army. The O-specs being their offense is going to help them a lot with being like hardcore learners. They're going to be able to learn the server quite well without losing offense and being at risk. The offensive elite is a lot more... It's got a bit more potential for funkiness. You can semi-suicide with it. It's not so bad to do that. Overall, I don't think human quite cuts it. It's obviously your best science race on its own, but I think the science efficiency innately that they used to have was just a little bit stronger than all this. But I do love O-spec offense, and so I might just play around with it anyways, because with O-spec offense, you can lean hard into people. And in an age where, meter isn't decaying, and there's, a lot of room to be hitting people and learning people, this is your best option right here. This and what we'll see with Undead. So perhaps humans can do it. We'll see. Orcs got nerfed a little bit, but on a little bit of review, I think orcs are actually still very strong. They lost 5% gains, but they still have 25% gains. Their draft costs went back to 50%, but it's still 50%. That's not nothing. They're still training elites with credits. They still have a 15-point elite with Bloodlust. They're gaining more credits than they were last age as well. But now they have a 10% building efficiency. 10% building efficiency nerf and a pretty high net worth elite. Also, their Warlord's Fury was buffed from 15% to 25% on the mini plunders. Overall, I think Orc is probably still your strongest attacker. Whether people want to still run them after 2 really heavy Orc ages remains to be seen. I think a lot of people will just say, hey, I can go Dryad Tact instead of Orc and still have that offense, not have to deal with Bloodlust and building efficiency penalties and all that. But I really do like the Orcs right now. I think they're incredibly strong. I thought Orc was quite overpowered last age, and if you didn't notice they were quite overpowered, it's probably because the only kingdoms with Orcs were 3 growth kingdoms that otherwise didn't interact with anyone else, sort of. But I think if you were competing, Orc is still your number 1 pick just for land. Now, if you want to get wars, you want to stay in range of people, you don't want to scare people away, you don't want to get into long, scary wars where you can get massacred to shit. I don't know. Maybe Orc then is a little bit tougher, but I'd say Orc's top of my list right now. Undead. Well, this is an interesting one. Minus 75% losses, 75% converts of enemy kills into your soldiers. You You spread plague. You also spread rotting plague with all hits, which gives people negative BE and food consumption. Shitload of bonuses. Very strong. They've got animate dead for even more soldiers when they're hit. Their offense is just never going to go away, and it's probably going to grow every time unless they're chained. Undead's crazy strong, but their glass cannons, a D-spec value of 8 is pretty rough. They're just going to get hammered, so my suggestion for your undead is build for it. Just embrace it. Like, make them suicide-y. You can add castles to make the chaining harder. You can add racks to make the chaining harder. You can just go really high offense and just smash people. I've seen essentially 0 defense undead many times in the ages, not just because of this D-spec change, and they've all done fine. It takes maybe a special way of playing it, but they're very strong. They also have converts, of course. So those O-specs are becoming those elites pretty easily. 20% rune cost, not the end of the world. It's going to make it a little harder to land lust, which you'll definitely be doing with that D-spec. And minus 20% science efficiency. That's going to scale against you as the age goes on. I think until week 6, you barely are going to notice. And you're going to be able to learn people, even if it doesn't help you as much. It's going to kill other people's books. You're going to be able to lean on people hard with basically no losses and a lot of penalties when you hit people. Having 2 separate plagues that need to be cured separately is really going to hurt people that are trying to conserve mana, use mana offensively. It's going to suck when it comes to food and runes. It's going to suck when it comes to land lusting. I think a kingdom with a lot of undead that does quite a few spread hits rather than sort of targeted massing and raising and chaining could do very well. One age I was running Dark Elf Sages, and we had a lot of defense, we had a lot of science, a lot of wizards that we were planning to use, and just the constant plague on everyone was just brutal. And I think in an age where you could see some tankier people, it's been sort of the meta for some people to be a little bit more tanky, focus on training defense, even going as far as, consistently Mystic Vortexing, meteor showers off people. And then you get hit with plague, and then you get hit with plague again. It's brutal. 2 mana casting on cleric's going to go a long way for helping out against undead. But really, you just have to hope that you can kill the undead faster than the undead can kill you, because there's not really a way to withhold against them. Like, it's gonna be rough with 2 kinds of plague on you, and all the sustain they get, the soldiers, etc. So, undead, I don't know how to rank it. I think anyone can make it work if they do it right. I think some people will do it wrong. Don't get hit with a lot of elites home and low D-specs and no hospitals is my... I don't think I'd run hospitals on these undead, but that makes your defense so sketchy. So you're going to have to figure it out one way or another. Personalities. Artisans essentially the same as it's always been. A slight nerf to their credits. They lost the raise resistance, which I've always quite liked on Artisan. Overall, I think it still fills a role for having a couple tanky utility provinces. Maybe slightly less attractive than it was, but still strong for its role. I don't think you're going to see, a lot of Artisans, but, just enough sprinkled in. Clerics, essentially unchanged, but instead of minus 25% spell damage, they have plus 25% hospital efficiency. So this is just leaning into their tanky, sustain-based play. Otherwise unchanged. They have revelations, so there's going to scale with science. They've got those pesky spells that you have to, Mystic Vortex for max damage. They've got a little bit of built-in sustain with salvation. They're tankier. They've got extra mana on their self spells. So you're always going to have max mana for Landlust. Even if you do tank those chains harder, then they have the Landlust on top of it. And the Hospitals is going to go a long way. This bonus is going to scale pretty well into the late age on top of having Revelations. So I'd keep my eye out on that. You're going to see max Hospital, Dwarf, Clerics, and you're going to see, 25% Hospital, Avian Clerics that are really, really hard to take down. I'm sure there's other Clerics too. I wouldn't recommend Clerics for Undead, even if you're thinking you want that extra D-spec defense. I don't love it. That's just me. Heretics. Heretics are quite a bit different. So what do we have? We have a Heretic with bonus Wizard production. That's the same. Less Thieves Lost on Ops. That's a little better, but about the same. They don't have the free WP anymore. They don't have what used to be essentially plus 20% damage, but it was only 1 tick a day, so that was rough. Instead, they just have plus 20% damage, so that's quite a buff. But they have that less WPA. They also lost the damage on Robs, which is really effective. They lost the Finesse Science, which, with the built-in minus losses is probably a bit of a wash. What they gained is plus 1 mana, plus 1 stealth, if they can make attacks. This is a big one. Almost always, Heretics fall behind to both Rogues and Mystics because of their output. They just have less mana or less stealth, and they're gaining less honor from it. And while the damage usually makes up for it on, if you multiply the damage by the stealth and mana, sure. However, this is quite a bit beyond that. Now, you don't have bonus WPA, you don't have bonus TPA, you don't have a science buff, so you're only able to do your ops and spells on people if you have quite a bit more TPA and WPA. If you have to do that on top of having, enough defense to not get massacred, and you need offense to make these attacks, it's going to be tough. So you're going to need a kingdom that can really reliably knock people's defense super low on chains. So this is mostly going to be kills based or offense based, where you just have enough offense to really drive home the hits. You're going to have to do a few out of range hits to make that happen, just to really drive people down. So it's a tough one. If you can make it work, that is insane output, just really insane output. But you have a lot of things you have to overcome: the TPA, the WPA, and getting the attacks off. And I don't know exactly how you're going to do it. Maybe you're just running hybrid so you can make the attacks happen anyways. But even if you're doing that, you're going to have masked out targets to reliably do stuff to. Also, you have to refresh this every 5 ticks. It's not like you're just waving once. You're going to have to try and hit every 5 hours. You're going to need mentors, or you're going to have no sleep whatsoever. So, yeah, Heretic is insane, but it is going to be hard work. Mystics. Mystics are strong. They lost Mage's Fury, which I love. I've never loved Mage's Fury on Mystics. It seems a little redundant. They also lost their auto ritual kill. Mystics were pretty overpowered last age with that. What you have now instead is ever slightly better guilds, not that important. But magic word duration is doubled. That's very strong. This is just going to be a huge nerf to landlusting primarily. Maybe this is good enough to just sort of keep on people now, but super important for countering landlusts. the ability for you to Mystic Vortex this off your chains is going to be insanely powerful. So Fairy, or just be on top of it. And Old School Chastity, that completely stops birth rate. Incredibly strong, will completely change the meta if you're using it reliably, like the way Eco just sort of always works out in every war. That stops if you actually can maintain that Chastity blanket. Now, to do that, you're going to have 6 Mystics or 4, hybrid Mystics really focusing on the Chastity. But it's doable. You have bonus mana on both Fairy and Elf. You have bonus durations on Fairy. Maintaining those Chastity blankets is going to be absolutely possible. So overall, Mystic gets quite a nerf because just that ritual killing ability is gone. And they lost Mage's Fury, so on races that aren't Dark Elf and Fairy, Mystic's quite a bit worse. But primarily the Mystics we saw last stage were Dark Elf and Fairy, so maybe we'll see quite a bit of Elf Mystics this age. I think that's quite likely. I think there's a few decent options for hybrid Mystics still, but they're just a little bit less powerful. But overall, Mystic's sort of just the same as Mystic's always been. 85% guilds and mind focus and ascendancies in the game. Yeah, it's bonkers how much WPA you can get and how fast. Rogue. Essentially identical, literally identical. No change to Rogue. Rogues are just sort of your bread and butter thieves, right? I think last stage a lot of people skimped on Rogues just because Mystics were so strong and Halflings were kind of weak, and there wasn't great options for Rogue otherwise. But I don't think that meant Rogues were weak. I just think that people didn't like Halfling last stage. I think Halfling's looking amazing this age, so I expect to see lots of Rogues again. And I think Rogue hybrids have some benefits that a lot of people don't use or see, but maybe not as much as it could be. Yeah, that's Rogue, nothing fancy there. Tactician, they have access to Reflect Magic. That's quite a big buff. I love Reflect Magic when a lot of people can have them, and now you can have your whole core with Reflect Magic, no problem. However, Tacticians did lose that credit buff, which was pretty substantial. So overall, I think Tactician's about the same spot as it used to be. It's just a little bit different. That Reflect Magic is gonna, with so many Tacticians on the server, I think, a high magic focus is gonna go down a little bit, based on last stage, and with the Halfling buffs, I think we'll just see a little bit more of a, maybe less of a TM focus, but I think TMs are stronger overall, so maybe just a little bit more of a classic Rogue and Mystic split. Attack time remains king in most circumstances, so Tacticians are going to do just fine. Warriors. Warriors are strong. Same shit as always. Still offense, still mercs and prisoners, still mercs, still tacticians, or tactics science. But they gain 2 things this age that are interesting. Access to Righteous Aggressor. This gives you converts on cast, and it also gives you converts on non-land hits, unlike usual converts. So in the weird situations you can mass and raise and even learn people with O-specs and gain elites from them is quite nice. Something to think about. And the fact that you can turn it on and off means that you can play something like a fairy or a human and not just automatically lose all your offense to converts. They're unique. You have 20% chance for 35% extra kills. Overall, that's a 7% buff to kills on offense only. So on average, basically shit. However, on the specific hits it happens, you're going to notice and people are going to whine, but, you have to average it out. It also has a chance to kill 30% of enemy soldiers at home. Not that applicable in most situations, but I suppose it might proc now and then on a big stack and you'll be pretty happy. Nearing the end, Raiders are a weird half thief, half warrior type build. So you have 10% offense, so you're pretty comparable to warrior there. You got cheaper thieves and more TPA. You also have minus 50% losses on operations in war only, though. So you can't just rob the server, which is significant. But 50% is bigger than what heretics get. It's going to be really nice on, those noobish provinces players we have. We all know that they don't know when to stop. They always push ops a little bit too far, too many. They lose too many thieves. They oversend a bit. So this is just going to help them a lot. Access to steal war horses. I would be extremely careful about letting people do this ever, as it's a very high send op, and even 50% minus losses is not enough to keep your thieves. So either you need to be succeeding almost every, 80% of the time, or you need to have a lot more minus losses than just this. And ideally, I think these things are supposed to stop you from needing thieves' dens, not to add into your thieves' dens, because at least the minus losses sort of stack negatively. The TPA doesn't. Tool science is an interesting one to have as a personality buff. It will scale pretty well, and that's something that Rider didn't have before. So I think Raider's actually decent. I doubt I'm going to pick them. I just kind of don't like it. I think everything a Raider does, a Warrior can do better in the right kingdom with the right leadership, right players, and just have more offense while doing it. But, it's enough TPA and sustain on your thieves that you can kind of make it so it's really tough for hybrids to interact with you. And then you only really need to worry about, halfling rogues doing a lot of damage to you. And I hadn't thought about it, but, I wonder if a halfling raider could do pretty decently. A halfling raider, you get the offense, you're stacking two kinds of TPA, so you're kind of roguelike. And you can actually sort of steal horses with them more easily. That's something to think about. Halflings actually got pretty good numbers there. So that's something I haven't looked at, but I will look at now, just in case I think it's good. Otherwise, what do we have? You got no +1 stealth. That's the big problem with Raider, is that, these things are all great, but the amount of ops you can do is just a lot lower than you want it to be. Unique ability, you get to nerf people's watchtowers by 15% after you make a hit on them. I don't think it's a big deal. It helps. It's a couple greater arsons, maybe if you don't have a rogue, or you don't want to use a rogue, or just to stack with your rogue. It's fine. It's barely better than a blizzard, and you have to make a whole attack on someone to do it. So overall, meh. It's not nothing, but in terms of a unique, I don't think it's that particularly powerful. But it does go in with the whole shtick. You're attacking people, and you're a thief. And they got worse watchtowers. What's not to love? Last but not least, we have Sage. Incredibly strong sages this age. Huge books, huge science. Learn protection is going to be necessary. Access to revelations. All normal, big, huge benefits. And that science efficiency scales up 15%. But it's in war only. And you're missing that first, wave of war. This is going to keep micro sages from being utterly broken, which I really appreciate the thought that went into that. And they're just going to have an insane amount of science. I think in a warring kingdom, this might be some of the best sages we've seen. Maybe I'll have to double check that so I'm not, talking out of my mouth. But I really like this sage. I think it's very strong. And I like that I don't have to deal with micros to deal with these sages. So keep sage on your mind when it comes to every pick you have, at least attacker. As just, maybe Sage can do this. Naturally, Sage is going to scale with the age quite a bit, so, you're not very strong in the first couple weeks. You're going to have to find a way to compensate for that, but Sage is great. Overall, I quite like the age. I like the balance. I in my revised, I poked at a few things here and there that I thought were too strong or less strong. And I'm already, unsure of everything I said because, some things I didn't particularly love in revised. I've been going over these changes. We did our cast of finals. I've been thinking about doing this rant. I've done some simulations. I've been talking a lot, mostly to myself, but to other people too now and then. And, I think there's a few standouts. But I've actually had so many ideas of picks that I think are strong from every race, every personality, different combos that I'm quite liking how the changes feel. And then on top of that, I love anything that encourages growth because I think growth should be, if not the only focus, a major or main focus for the majority of players. I like that I'm not going to have to deal with fucking pool capping anymore because I just literally wasn't bothering to do that, even though it was a requirement to think about land crowns. And I've been in, second place land thinking, man, it'd be nice if I had a bunch of pool right now, like every age since pool came out. I really like the push for 25 provinces. I think that's super important for the longevity of the game and for the player base to play that 25-person game. I dislike heavily the, run 22, 23 prov meta to chase crowns and chase science and chase honor. I've hated it since day one, and this is the first time I've actually seen a modicum of effort put into countering that. All of these things I personally love. And now people will be like, of course you love them. You're into changes and you're just getting pandered to, which is just hilarious because I have very few good words to say about David more often than not. At least in private. I actually talk David up a fair bit in public because I love his vision and I'm seeing some of his vision come out in these changes. But most of the time when I'm talking to David, it's because he's not doing what I want when it comes to support tickets. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm not necessarily the most diplomatic guy all the time. I also like the aggressive stance changes. It's fine. Hostility changes, I think I'm gonna like it because, more than a lot of people, I'm into just fucking around and finding out. And I think this age look good for that, but I don't know if it's actually going to sort of work out in a healthy way. Remains to be seen, so fingers crossed there. Maybe I'm putting a lot of effort into doing some sims on different picks, so I might do another rant about some combos I've picked out and setups and stuff like that, but maybe I won't, because then all my good ideas will be out there and I won't be able to beat you all. Or maybe I'll put it out, but I'll keep the really good ones secret, so then everyone will get mad at me for lying to everyone. That's a good idea, right? Anyways, thanks for listening. That's Age 111 Final Changes. I hope you all enjoyed my rant. And, yeah, till next time. Peace out.